What's up and welcome to the Level Health Podcast. Today, Josh is interviewing Brendan Fox. Brendan is a kinesiologist and fitness trainer, and he holds over 30 health and fitness certifications. He's also the head of education at Exercise Therapy Association, which is an organization focused on teaching professionals how to get their clients fully functional and moving pain-free. Brendan is a wealth of information and has some incredible insights on aspects of the energy that many professionals have avoided in the past, such as mobility and mindset. Big thanks to Brendan for coming on our show. You can follow him on Instagram at exercisetherapy.association or check out their website, exercisetherapyassociation.com. We'll have those linked in the description below. For those of you that don't already know, our website, Level Health, is a directory, community, and network of qualified personal trainers. We want to help create a space where clients are able to find the right trainer for them. We have accounts for both clients and fitness professionals. Client accounts are always free, where you'll get access to our trainer directory and other resources. Our basic pro option is now available for trainers, and our verified pro membership will be available early this year. We also have our free membership option for trainers that want access to our growing list of discounts and resources. If you haven't signed up already, head over to levelhealth.net and set up your membership. Thanks for listening, and if you have a second, we would love it if you gave us a rating and review so that our podcast and the professionals we interview can get more exposure. You can also subscribe so you don't miss any of our new content. Thanks, and we hope you enjoy the episode.
I think a big part of it is just being kind of authentic to yourself, and like you would have probably had the exact opposite mindset, I believe, if you were putting up this persona. You were trying to you had this idea, and I think that happens a lot in fitness. Is we aren't interacting with people through our actual selves. We're interacting with people through this persona that we're trying to kind of construct continuously. And I mean, social media definitely. It's just like a training ground for that. Like it's almost like as a fitness pro, it seemed like this, and I'm sure that you've probably seen the same thing. It seems like as a fitness pro, it was almost like a prerequisite. And then people like yourself, and I like to think that to some degree myself as well, have just really stayed authentic to ourselves and really put out into the world our same self every single day, and really are doing what we're doing. I know that you're doing what you're doing from a kind of a root of like passion, but I also don't really like necessarily using that word, because I feel like that's not really fully encompassing of what kind of drives people. So actually that's kind of a perfect way to start out, man. Brendan, would you mind just giving us some background on who you are and why you do what you do?
Okay, so I'm about 20 years now. And when I started in the fitness industry, I noticed there was a lot of gaps in education. I went and did kinesiology and graduated university. And so I just went on a huge learning journey. I just raised the bar. I decided I want to do this for the rest of my life. So I'm going to take as many courses as I can. I spent all of my money, put myself into incredible debt. I was traveling all over North America, learning from everybody, and then trying everything out in the real world, making case studies, figuring out what worked, what didn't work. And then in my journey, I've been fortunate enough to then go on and be able to help Canadian Olympic athletes. I was been on national TV. I've traveled internationally as a presenter, and I've spent the last 14 years working out of the biggest medical clinic in Canada, running a team of kinesiologists and trainers, and basically being a last-stop shop for the really hopeless cases of people with aches and pains. And they've kind of seen everybody and nobody's figured it out. It's my specialty was to just do really advanced assessments to really get to the root of what was going on with people. And then after a while, I was enjoying a lot of success with clients, and I'm really enjoying my career. And then after a while, and I created a playbook. So it's kind of like, here's the assessments I use, here's the correctives I use, here's the programs. And after a while, people really started to ask me and to twist my arm to teach people what I knew. I didn't really have an interest in being a teacher and teaching the system, but I then went on to do it, and I realized how much I love the people I teach, and to me, they're all like little brothers and sisters, and I just want to see them do well because I know their heart's in the right place. So now I work as head of education for the Exercise Therapy Association, and a lot of my times I'm going around teaching courses, teaching trainers, giving them the tools to succeed they never got in university, and trying to help them realize just how great they can be.
Yeah, I've been surprised. I mean, we've been connecting with a lot of fitness pros across the space, as you know, is very possible now with the way that the world is. Everything's globalized, and like from different parts of the world, and so like it's not just like one place like the United States that's doing this. I've seen it all over. Like people are graduating or getting these certificates, and that's great and everything for sure. I'm sure, obviously, you know, the importance of self-education, continue education, but like if they're getting these certifications and then they just are really wholly unprepared for what actually being a fitness professional is, and then on top of that, we're getting dumped into the current state of the fitness industry, which is an evolving and growing and maturing industry. It's like we're kind of setting a lot of people up for failure, a lot of fitness professionals up for failure. And I see a lot of people talking about it. I see a lot of people talking about this issue, but often it's attacking it from like the financial, the business perspective, which is for sure important, obviously. And it's also a big gap in our basic education that we get. We don't get much guidance as to how to sell ourselves, how to present ourselves, how to make copy and things like that. But what we also don't get is, like you said, the assessments. And like that has been one of the biggest, because if you don't know what you're seeing, like if you don't know what's wrong, like if you can't figure out where to start with people, whether it's, you know, because of an imbalance or a past injury, or it's just they're not functionally able to express a movement or express strength or something, like you have to know where they're at. So that's like a big part I wanted to ask about today. You've talked a little bit about like the mission behind Exercise Therapy Association, though. So before we could go into before we go into like the nitty gritty on some assessments and stuff, because that's going to be like my personal geek out question session there. What really led to you mentioned that there are big gaps in the industry and everything like that, and people wanted you to teach it, but like, was there like a moment when you're like, okay, this needs to happen?
Yeah, I would say, you know, there was one client I had, and they had piriformis syndrome, one of my first clients. You know, and I graduated university, and I'm like, I don't remember them really saying much of significance on this subject. And so I felt like an imposter. I'm like, did I miss class that day? Like, how did I not know? And the kinesiologist like telling me about fibromyalgia. I'm like, they never even mentioned it in university. And then so I was getting, it was just, they ended up giving me the most difficult cases where I started working, because I went and did a number of certifications and the university degree. And so and all these people were just so invested in me to find the answers. And I could just tell they had so much hope in me, and I didn't want to let them down. And I felt like an imposter. So for me, I remember like going to sleep at night and seeing the faces of people that I felt like I was letting down because I didn't have the answers that apparently I should have. And I was like, you know what? I got to go out there and find them. They got to be somewhere. I will put myself in debt. I can make the money back in the rest of my life. Right. But I've got to be out. There has to be a way. And then I realized like, oh, piriformis syndrome, like all of the experts are hopelessly confused. Like fibromyalgia, all of the experts are hopelessly confused. Like all these conditions I was finding that everyone else was confused. So then I had to like figure out on my own, I had to innovate systems for assessing posture and assessing all the different things involved and all the different possible culprits behind a pain syndrome, and kind of like put it all together in a system, kind of like the same way that a mechanic will check certain things one at a time. I had to figure out these checks, and I did over 30,000 hours one-on-one, and I made case studies the whole time. So I've got endless files saved on my computer for every different type of problem. And here's what I tried, and here's how it worked out. Here's what I tried, and here's how it worked out. So eventually I just took like the greatest hits of what works best, what's most reliable. And that's what I teach. It's kind of like I'm taking 30,000 hours, and I read over 900 books. I stopped counting at 30 certifications, spent hundreds of thousands on education, and I'm literally trying to take the complex and make it simple and give it to people in a recipe formula. And, you know, and the way I teach it at the Exercise Therapy Association, we're big fans of learn by doing. So I don't teach by pointing at a PowerPoint and getting people to get carpal tunnel syndrome, trying to take notes and keep up. It's like, no, if this is real, we can do it right now with real people in the class. Let's show how to assess somebody. Let's do a feedback loop. Let's test out a corrective, and let's see the difference it made. It's like, so we do live case studies all throughout our courses just to show this information in action.
I think that you like that structure is certainly very, very necessary, right? Like for you to be able to kind of nail down variables as much as you can within the complex system that is the human musculoskeletal system. But like having that, going through your due diligence really, and making sure that you've got every bit of information collected that you can. I think it's an interesting space for sure, because people would want to perhaps say like, oh, that's not evidence-based, like the things that you're doing, not necessarily at that time were not evidence-based, but like you were developing the body of evidence during that time. And like you said, the experts were confused. So like this may be a perfect example of a process for anybody to kind of copy, not necessarily copy, but emulate, if we're on that fringe of like what the evidence says, and then like, okay, now we also have to consider personal anecdote and our own observations and experiments, and use that initial evidence base that like you did, like you said, you went and found that information, that what there was out there, and then let's broaden this, let's systematically broaden this, so that when people are like, what the heck are you doing? I'm like, look at, like, I have the evidence here of what I'm doing, like we're exploring, we're figuring things out as we go. You said that you felt like you were letting people down, like that really resonated with me, because like that's what I felt every single day with clients. Like exactly, I think that that might be the root of where a lot of people have like imposter syndrome as fitness professionals, for sure. And I guess there's two ways that you could go with that. The first way is to just kind of let it overwhelm you and end up getting burned out on training or whatever you're doing. Or you can do, the path that you did and use it as a motivating factor for, trying to be a little bit less wrong over time.
Yeah. So to comment on what you said, I think that, it takes maturity to respect evidence-based information. Okay. I'm a big fan of science is doing a service to all of us. It's foolish not to pay attention to what science says. However, oftentimes we expect too much from science. Science creates specialized silos of knowledge, but there's a lot of gaps in between. And they will be the first ones to say this. They always end with that more research is needed at the end of each study. Yet everyone says if science doesn't have the answer, you can't respect it. So I think it takes maturity to respect science and benefit from the contribution science makes to society. It prevents us from going headlong into foolishness. But I think it also takes maturity to know that there comes a point when you have to roll up your sleeves and go in there and figure it out, right? And that takes maturity, is not to say, well, if there is no answer, if science doesn't have an answer, there's no answer. I think that takes a different attitude. So an immature attitude might be, show me the studies, because show me the studies means that the answer is going to be in the studies, not necessarily so, right? I could say a better attitude would be, show me the results, show me the outcomes, right? And then I think at the end of the day, it's like, when I teach things with Exercise Therapy Association, we don't teach something as if this is like the written in stone truth. We teach something as if this is a very reliable experiment that's been reliable in the past, but it's always an experiment because every client is individual and unique. Even if it's the same classified problem, we always want to approach it, even with our clients, as I've got a good experiment. Let's see how it works. This has been beneficial for many people in your situation. And just to approach it with that kind of open-mindedness, rather than just being proud and dogmatic, like this is what we have to do now, right?
Yeah, that's hilarious. Something that I think that a lot of the public has probably become a little bit more cognizant of is the scientific process as of late, and the misconstrued scientific process that seems to have occurred lots of places. But regardless, like you said, the need to integrate the silos, that's very important. But oftentimes I think that good science, and this is, I think that most people that understand the scientific mindset would agree with this, is that oftentimes even good scientific research brings up more questions than it does answers, because you're always looking for, okay, what does this tell me? How can I continue to become less wrong? And like I think that I wanted to touch on something you said. I absolutely agree that, you're saying, where's the science, people would say, and oftentimes that's just a defense mechanism. And then the other side of that would be, okay, here are the outcomes. However, I've also seen that misused as well, because it's people applying the survivorship bias. But that's also very important to note that what you said about looking at each individual client as an individual, but also as an experiment based off of your previous, the previous data that you've collected. Because at that time, it's like, I think that a lot of times I've come to this conclusion with a lot of people. I think that we get ourselves into these like you said, silos, honestly, but we get ourselves into like these microcosms where like our identity is so tied up in being right about this thing that it's like we don't even give ourselves the opportunity to be wrong and change. So it's like that there's so much strange, like I don't want to say culture, but there's so many strange practices and behaviors around fitness professionals that it's funny that these things keep being brought up, for sure.
You know, it's a good point. And I think just as we correct form in exercise, form and technique to get good results and avoid aches and pains, we also need correctives of perspectives. And having the perspective that I need to have the answers is something that leads to poor results and aches and pains. It makes us inauthentic, you know, will come off, and that can come off very obvious. We can hold back on times when we might be wrong, right? We might be afraid to experiment. But I think, you know, so I think that attitude in itself is something we can correct. In fact, in research, the way that they measure courage is through vulnerability. And courage is the most admired character virtue. So if you can actually lead with vulnerability, you will be more admired. I think a greater strength for a fitness professional than you know, an 800-pound deadlift or 500-pound bench press, the greatest strength for a fitness professional is humility. Because humility will get you further, it'll get your clients further, it'll bring you the life you really want, the career you really want, the client transformations that you yearn for. It will ultimately lead to that financial freedom and everything else. But that is the greatest strength as a fitness professional, is humility. It is the might of the mighty to just be able to say, hey, look, I don't know for sure. I'm not a fortune teller, but let me tell you, I've collected a fair standard of evidence to suggest that this is a wise and worthy experiment for us to try next. Let's see together how it turns out, right? We don't have to ever pretend we have the answer. I never tell people like, I've got the answer. I'm all about, because that I think in itself is blind belief, right? And blind belief is an immature perspective as well. I think we should always opt for truth through experience, right? Which is much more mature as well. So we should always, when and where we can, we should run experiments to verify the truth. Because I think that's honestly respecting the unique individual you're working with and the unique situation. And we don't know, I mean, there's a confluence of variables. There's psychological variables, biochemical variables, biological variables, biomechanical variables. There's all these different variables, and they're all intermingling in a number of unpredictable ways. So we can't really predict the entire human system and every little thing that's going on.
Yeah.
But we can do our best to just be honest and make an honest, sincere effort. And that's what I'm all about. And that's what we're all about at the exercise therapy system. It's all about make a sincere effort to just use truth from experience to do what's best for the individual, right?
Yeah, you can't be authoritarian. Like you're saying, if we truly are desiring these life transformations for people, which is a huge audacious goal. We know how difficult behavior change is, but it's absolutely not going to occur probably to, I hate speaking in hyperbole, but if you have this coach that's this authoritarian dictator that's just telling people what to do, controlling them, giving them this prescription, like how can you possibly expect any type of transformation to occur? They may weigh less for a little bit, or they may, you know, lift more weight for a little bit, but it's like, I mean, it's just too short-sighted. Like you're saying, immature. It's just not a very, I mean, it's just not going to actually create any lifestyle changes or anything that's going to last for more than, you know, whatever period of time you're working with them. And what I've always liked to do since I've, you know, became a mature enough fitness professional to realize this is I always told people in my first consultation, like, we're not going to be right away. Like there's absolutely, like you're saying, all of those variables, like there's so many unknowns that it's like, there's absolutely no way that we're going to choose the right path for you right away. If we do, I mean, we struck the lottery, that's awesome. But I mean, we're planning for it and we're adapting, but it's like, I mean, there may be 18 different things that we identify in the first consultation. And, you know, old Josh, my, you know, a younger trainer, myself would have been like, okay, we need to start tackling all 18 things. It's like, man, let's try to find what will give you kind of the biggest bang for your buck here. And on that note, kind of, I wanted to ask you, I'm being kind of selfish because I've talked a lot with people about things like, behavior change, the psychology behind it, the nutrition, even things like that. But I think that I'm going to exploit this conversation with you to get training principles and things like that. And I want to go into assessments as well. But for the average person that's really just wanting to lift, and I want to have a key caveat there, function in their daily life for the rest of their life and integrate this fitness thing into their daily experience, what are some general training principles that they can apply to achieve that end goal?
Well, I think it's all about just being aware of the fact that we don't know what we don't know. And I think that the best principles can be applied from a thorough assessment from a competent professional. Like, I think those principles are going to be very unique to the individual, but I think it comes down to this. We all do better with a guide, right? We all do better with somebody who knows more that can help us so we don't have to learn everything the hard way. Because, if you just sort of submit yourself to the guidance of a wise and worthy mentor, coach, trainer, anything like that, then they can tell you the best things to be done and the best ways to do it from their heightened perspective. And I think that can save us a lot of time, trouble, and heartache, is just to have the humility, first of all, to just ask for help, right? Yeah. Have the humility to ask for help. And then I think a lot of those principles will come based on, because a lot of it's relative. It's somewhat of I hate to not give you a really juicy answer on this, but it's so open-ended. I can't really be fair and say, this is what you need to do. You need to start here and blah, blah, because it all depends on the individual, right?
Yeah,
but
for sure.
But I would say, if somebody does have, in order to be resilient in the long term, if you do have an ache or a pain, let's say it's a neck pain, a shoulder pain, a low back concern, a knee problem that comes up from every now and then, what I would encourage you is to consider the entire body in your assessment. And that sounds so obvious, but it is so overlooked. In North America, I think part of where we're still improving is taking that holistic approach to assessment. Sometimes a shoulder problem can be coming from the neck, right? Sometimes a back problem is coming from the hip. Sometimes hip bursitis is coming from a knee that's collapsing inward, right? If you don't look at the whole body, you might miss the necessary piece, that greatest point of leverage. So it would be to just consider the whole body in assessment. Exercise Therapy Association, we teach that right out of the gates, is like a primate full body assessment. It's like, here's 8 quick things you're going to check right away. And if any of these things show a red flag, we do a deep dive and we do a whole series of assessments on that one concerned body part. So it's like, we're just going to check a number of things. And if any of these things have any concerns, then we deep dive that body part with further assessments to get further clarity.
Now, for those 8 things, if you didn't mind covering those, that'd be awesome. But I guess it's specific to, I'm assuming those are joints and postural positions, things like that. What are the 8 things that you're looking at?
So I'll explain. We have a number of assessments on the feet. We assess the knees, we assess the hips, we assess the shoulders, we assess the neck, and we assess stress. Like, that is the 8 overview. And of course, that 8 doesn't cover everything. Like, if somebody comes in and they have a wrist or elbow issue, we'll do wrist and elbow stuff with them that's outside of that 8, but that's more of an anomaly, right? Most of the pain patterns in the body are generated from those areas, right? So that's like the quick 8 overview that we teach people when they come in. And then we teach them breakout assessments for each. So let's say you find a concern in the ankle. Maybe the ankle is collapsing inward, it's pronated, or it's collapsing outward, it's supinated, right? Or maybe we have some dysfunctions on eversion or inversion or whatever, right? Then we go into a breakout assessment for the ankles and feet so that you can see what's going on. We're going to show you, this is what you're looking for. And if you find it, this is the experiment you try. So rather than just telling you what to do, like, oh, here's what you need to strengthen, here's what you need to loosen, we just say, try this recipe. It does what we would tell you to do, but it's a practical example of all of those what to do's in action. We're going to give you the recipe, and then in the recipe we explain why we're doing each ingredient. It's like, okay, so this is, somebody's got flat arches. Okay, so we're working on tibialis posterior here to help pull up some of the bones that create the arch, and we're doing this and that and the other thing, right? So we kind of give like a step-by-step system, because what I found, and I don't know if you've experienced this, but what I found is sometimes I would take courses and it was like an assessment salad. They just throw assessments and there's no real rhyme or reason on how to use any of this stuff. And then sometimes they just show you like a salad of moves with the foam roll and stretches and this and that. But it's like, well, I mean, you're giving us all these ingredients, but that's like literally taking everything in your fridge and throwing it into a bowl and say, eat it, right? It's not going to taste good. You need to have these things in the right amounts and the right combinations to get a master recipe here. So I found that was my frustration with the industry, because I was taking all these courses, and that's what I kept finding was the consistent pattern in our continuing education, is that there was a low standard on applicability and practicality on this stuff. Just be very simple and straightforward. Like, hey, if you find this, this is what it means. Here's what you should try next, right?
Yeah, I wonder how much of that is just them not wanting to even enable trainers to potentially breach their scope of practice at all. I'm not sure if that's the case, like if they're just trying to, because I was thinking the same thing while you're talking. I was thinking about how myself, and I've seen other trainers, including my girlfriend, go through the certification process, and like the corrective exercise stuff, it was so cut and dry. Like, if this is happening, it's this. And it's like, oh, I don't know, there might be something else going on. I'm assuming you're starting, so you have to go into depth, because like you said, like it's going to be a dynamic process, but are you just flexing and extending and rotating all the joints and checking every position that it should be able to achieve and maintain, and then just seeing if there's any deficits or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what we do is posture assessment within various norms, and then we do function assessments. Are the muscles working as well as they could? Do you have stability where you could, right? So a lot of it is performance based. I would say that, and this is always something I have to comment on. I would say that we always teach at the Exercise Therapy Association, when in doubt, refer out. When in doubt, refer out. I mean, that's the biggest thing. And then I think, another thing is that you have to be able to understand what's going on to even know how to refer out and to whom. So unless you're good at assessment, you're going to refer somebody out for a back issue when really it was coming from the ankles or something else. Like, unless you're thorough in assessment, you won't know how to refer out with precision, right? So it's kind of like, so that's a bigger part of our responsibility to our clients, is we need to know how to do this stuff to be able to send people in the right direction.
I think that's a great example of and I'm sure this is what you've been achieving with your training facility. I think that's a great example of how, as trainers and coaches, we can kind of take a much more proactive role in the healthcare system. We can be that tool that assesses people at the ground floor, well before they potentially would go into a physical therapist, or even potentially afterwards. And we can see these things, and we can, okay, this is obviously outside of my scope, which you would only know if you were intimately familiar with that end, and then you can send them out to people. But like I think a lot of trainers, we're kind of blinded by our own inability to, like you said, assess and understand what's actually happening. And so we can tell when that threshold is achieved that we're like, okay, this is too much for us. Are you starting with the feet during this assessment? Is that like step one?
We start with personal pain movement. So if somebody has a movement that brings on ache or pain, then we want to know what it is, right? Because that is the most relevant assessment to the individual. Yeah. Emotionally, it's relevant. In a practical everyday experience, it's relevant. So our biggest priority is, what is their pain movement? It's like, okay, when I squat, my left knee hurts. Okay, that's relevant. Every time you sit down and stand up. So that's the one we're going to try to affect change in the most. More than anything is your personal pain movement. Then we go on to the feet, and the importance of the feet. I found that the feet were so often overlooked, like in university education. I know people who've graduated physio, and they're like, they barely touch on the feet, and it's very insufficient. And all other like types of therapists are like, nobody's really helping us be competent with the feet, right? I went to a conference in the US, and there was this really high qualified speaker. He was a PhD, and he was like, everybody has flat arches, so you need to treat everybody like they have flat arches. And he made it in a very authoritarian way. And we all kind of looked at each other like, did he really just say that? Everybody has flat arches. I can't tell you how many clients I've seen that had high arches, the opposite problem. We had to do the opposite things to finally get them out of aches and pains. I'm like, so this is somebody who's lecturing, but not in the front lines. So I think there's a big difference between those people who are the practical technicians on the front lines that educate, and those who just educate for a living, because I feel like they're in a different reality than we are.
Yeah.
Right? Like they don't know what we're experiencing on the front lines, what's relevant, what's practical, So
Was he maybe at like a lab researching flat arches, and he's like, well, everybody seems to have flat arches, but like, dude, you're doing research on people with flat arches. You just put yourself.
He was a prof at a big school in the States. Right. And
Gotcha.
so he was lecturing, and he was just like, just everybody has flat arches, just and this is what you do. And we're just like, whoa. And maybe he was being unnecessarily dramatic, but it shows you that, if you pay the big bucks and you travel and you go to these conferences to see the top speakers, they might confuse you even more with misleading information, right?
Yeah.
At some point you got to use truth through experience. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I became so deeply familiar with the complexities of the human foot so it was about 4 years into my Marine Corps career, I developed debilitating plantar fasciitis, like to the point where like I was hobbling place to place, and to the point where when I went in, they literally, this is a medical doctor, by the way, literally just this is the only advice they told me, was that I just wasn't going to be able to work out and train my legs ever again. Like they told me, you just can't do lower body anymore. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. No discussion, hey, are you wearing these heavy ass boots during your work time? And then when you get off, you're wearing flip flops and sandals. It's like, okay, well, what's that doing to your feet? Are you taking care of your feet? And then actually this was just a kind of a Band-Aid on the problem. But I was working with an old school bodybuilding coach at the time, like old school Southern California, like been around since the old days. And he said that whenever they used to get plantar fasciitis, they would just practice grabbing the ground with their foot. Like it's like hand, and that was strengthening the intrinsic muscles in the feet, and I'm not at all exaggerating. Literally immediately, I was able to walk without pain, and obviously that was only for a few steps, but that wasn't what was happening before. And I was like, okay, so there's information out there. People know these things, so but potentially on a smaller scale, similar to what you experienced, that was kind of a transformational moment for me, where I was like, okay. Not to sound, too dramatic, but the medical system isn't going to help me here. They literally just told me I was going to get shots. I was going to get hydrocortisone shots. I was going to take pain NSAIDs for the rest of my life, and I couldn't work out my legs. So that was like my first experience and that was right at the time I was transitioning out of the military to become a personal trainer. I was like, oh man, this was a great experience. I got to experience like that not everybody knows everything, and we tend to like kind of, especially in America, default to whatever our physician says. But like, there's definitely fitness professionals out there that may be able to lead and guide you in a better direction sometimes.
Yeah. I think one of the things we do, and it's a thought habit we have, is we take our preferences for reality and we make them our expectations for reality. Like, hey, life would be really easy if the doctors had the answers. Or, we always want life to be easier or different than it actually is. And the bigger the gap between how reality is and what our expectations are, the more we're frustrated by it. Right. But it's like, I think we we give too much credit to the medical professionals. They've already got so much to know, right, in their own specific areas of expertise. And, I'm somebody who worked in a medical clinic for 14 years, side by side with the doctors on all these difficult cases. So I could collaborate on all the various tests and everything on all the most difficult patients. I was working back and forth with doctors for 14 years every day. So for Monday to Friday. So it was like, I was very well integrated in the medical system, and I know the ins and outs of what they can do, what they can't do. And, with the group I was working with, I found great humility. Like they were always very mature, like, hey, Brennan, we don't quite understand what's going on here. Can you just do your thing and let us know what you think next, right? Like there was a lot of great collaboration, but at the same point, even they say people put too much pressure. They expect the doctor to know everything. It's like, they don't specialize in that necessarily. So it'd be convenient for us if they did know everything, but sometimes there's professionals like yourself and other people out there that are better to see, that are going to have better eyes on the situation, that have lived it and been on the front line. Right?
I have, actually in multiple places in my house, I have a poster that just to remind me, it says, a bad day for your ego is a good day for your soul. And I think that you probably went through so many ego squashing experiences in that environment, because something that's incredibly scary, I think for a lot of people, is we reach this threshold of knowledge where we feel like we're proficient at what we do. And then we inevitably will encounter crossroads where we either stay there we stay in that environment that allows us to feel smarter than everybody, or allows us to feel, whatever it does. And then we can go the other way, where we enter an environment like you did, or I entered the environment of, we started Level, and it's like, okay, we're going to start connecting with people that are just so far above us in terms of education and experience and wisdom. And it's like, if I was putting on this persona, if we were trying to, establish ourselves as an authority, we'd be squashed really quickly. So do you look back at that experience as like a very, very, or you're still going through it, obviously, but kind of a pivotal moment in your career?
Yeah, I think, first of all, I love what you said about a bad day for the ego is a good day for the soul, because I think that is really what holds fitness professionals back most, is ego. The ego always prioritizes the comfortable thing. The comfortable thing is to have willful ignorance and just remain confused rather than put out the effort to understand things. That's an ego thing too. It's like, I'm going to do the comfortable thing. It feels good for me. Like, that's an ego thing. When we get beyond the ego, that's when we're heroic and we will make the sacrifices thinking of the welfare of others. Yeah. Right. So if somebody is really, that's what really drives people to educate themselves, is going beyond the ego in a way. The caveat is you can also get intellectual pride as well, that people are using that as a way to kind of feel better than everybody else. But, I found that through my experiences, there's a number of things that I tell myself regularly. I call it humility hygiene. It's kind of like in the same way that you clean dirt off your hands or you take a shower, you need to clean off things that would grow the ego. So one of the things I tell myself is that the universe is infinite and so is my ignorance. Yeah. Right? Because when I remind myself across all space and time, I know so little still compared against every planet and all time, that it keeps me open-minded. Right? And then I remind myself that, I don't know what I don't know. I have tremendous capacity to be wrong, even though I think I'm right. Like tremendous, no matter how right I might think I am on something, right? I might think that this mouse is solid. Well, apparently it's mostly empty space between the molecules, right? I might think that my shirt is blue, but in truth, it's everything but blue. Blue is not inherent to my shirt. Blue is what's being reflected, right? You might think I just dropped the mouse down, right? You might be so sure that went down, right? But the truth is it dropped towards the center of the earth. The direction up, down, sideways depends on the spin. And you're in LA, I'm in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. So it's going to be at a slightly different angle than it would be for you, right? Yeah. So we can be so sure of something and be so wrong. And I remind myself that all the time. And then I also remind myself that my success is a reflection of the success of others who have shaped me into being and have contributed to my experience in so many countless ways. And then I play a game. Okay. So let's say I'm like really proud. Okay. Like a client comes in and they got aches and pains for, I saw somebody who had a knee pain for 20 years. Okay. And I saw him and we did some stuff with his neck. Okay. And it was some stuff I teach in the level 2 of exercise therapy. And he was able to walk without a limp right away after doing a neck corrective. And then his pain was gone. Like he was considering, he was told by his doctor to get like a knee replacement, right? It wasn't actually a knee problem, right? And then he started to tell everybody and wrote about me and stuff. And I immediately had to be like, no, I got to stop right now. Like, I can't let this get to the head. Who had to do a good job so I could do a good job. And then I break it down. I'm like, okay, well, I've had teachers and mentors. I couldn't have done it without them. Somebody taught me the English language. If I didn't speak English, I couldn't do it. People in the grocery store and farmers make it possible so I don't have to grow my own food. If I had to grow my own food, I wouldn't have the time to learn all this stuff. Somebody invented indoor electricity so I can work late at night and learn these things. Somebody invented the plumbing system and built my house so I can enjoy the conveniences that free me up mentally to be able to advance in this way that I could be the person I had to be in that moment. So I play this game and I just say, who else had to do a good job? Who else had to do a good job? Until I'm less than 1% of the equation. Then I'm like, okay, good. That's good form on thinking. Now I can move forward, right?
Yeah, I think that can be an incredibly useful practice because on the scale of human achievement, like the things that, I mean, no offense, but the things that you and I are doing are so small, so minuscule, and they can be huge in people's lives for sure. They can definitely be transformational in people's lives. And I think that's something that we should aspire to, is to create those changes. But like in the grand scheme of things, like we're not creating rockets. We're not flying to the moon like some people are right now. Like we're just helping people live a little bit better life. And honestly, it's fun and not funny, but it's interesting that our main source of friction and our main source of difficulty tends to be our own minds and our own, like, one of the biggest things for me is to try to keep my ego under control is like being aware and cognizant of your thoughts, being aware if you're, say you're planning to go do something, if the thoughts, or if you're just deciding to make a decision, if my thoughts are like, what are people going to think about this? If that comes into it for a second, it's like, well, I'm not making it based off of the right criteria anyway. So I need to make sure that those aren't the ones that are leading those decisions. And I think this is all kind of circling back to my final question, which this whole podcast ended up being basically about, is how the fitness industry can improve it overall. And it's something that came up when you were talking. I was just thinking, I mean, in North America, it's well over this, but in the United States, we have at least 300,000 fitness professionals. And it's something that's always been driving behind Level, and the mission that we're trying to accomplish is just imagine if we can tap into even a fraction of that for creating these positive changes in the space, for being able to assess people on the level that you're talking about, being able to create changes in people's lives on the level that we've both been talking about. Like being able to have a fitness industry where fitness professionals, personal trainers, and coaches are like literally at the level of a healthcare professional, which it seems like that your facility has really kind of been spearheading. Is that kind of what you're trying to accomplish with that space, like having this collaborative environment with multidisciplinary teams, basically being somewhat the norm in the space?
Well, I think you don't have to necessarily work in a medical clinic like myself, but you can create what you call your all-star team. And I would encourage every fitness professional to find like, who is that all-star dietitian that you can meet and network with, that you can send people to? Who is that all-star chiropractor in your life, acupuncturist, physiotherapist, naturopath? I would encourage you to kind of go out there and meet and network with as many different types of healthcare providers as you can, so that when the time comes, you can present to your client to say, hey, look, here's a team of people that I believe in for these various reasons, and here's how they can all help you out. You don't have to think that you have to sacrifice and go out and join a clinic that already exists. You can create one yourself. The best thing to do is whenever your client goes to see somebody, like whether it's a foot expert or anybody else, see if you can go along with them and join them. I did that in my career. Like I'd go along for, if my client goes to a therapy session, I'd just sit in and talk. And then the therapists were always so impressed. Like, this trainer has taken time out of their schedule to just sit there and be like, tell me what I don't know I need to know. Like, that was usually what I would say, like, here's what I'm doing. I'm being completely transparent. But, if you have any other thoughts on things you might experiment with, let me know. And I did that for years. And I built such a huge network that way because it shows trust. It shows vulnerability.
Yeah.
But I found it was like free education, because I found like every single time I went, I learned some key information I didn't know that I didn't know. Right. So you can build your own network and just know that when you do refer out, you yourself grow more. When you expand your network, you yourself grow more. You don't have to know it all. Right. I mean, eventually people will realize it's a very self-limiting way to conduct yourself professionally, is to try to put that pressure on yourself. It's more fun to win as a team. You grow more when you win as a team, and your client gets more perspectives. It's more beneficial to them. So I always say, encourage it. You can build it and encourage it. And I think that's a part of what we all go through, is in our experience in this industry, we're all on a journey. And it's a journey from ignorance to understanding in all things. Okay, we go from ignorance to understanding, first of all, in our priorities. A lot of times people prioritize courses that they want to take for themselves because it's like more bodybuilding, powerlifting, or whatever, and they want to use it for themselves. And then they use the excuse, I'm taking courses for my clients, but it's not really benefiting the clientele they work with, right? So we have a shift in priorities. Then we have a shift in our thinking. Like, we start to realize how the mind really is the forgotten muscle. So at the Exercise Therapy Association, we teach mental toughness is built into the curriculum. My background is being a gold medal mental toughness coach, the Olympic athletes and such. And so I come from that background as well. And we blended in on how to coach the mental toughness, because when people fail, it's most often not for purely technical reasons. Usually they just fail in in giving themselves permission to quit. They just give up, which is more of a mental weakness. So one of the first things we teach is you got to realize that it's foundational to get your client to believe in their highest potential first. And to put them back in touch with their highest potential. So we build self-efficacy first, like building strength in one of the major lifts. You need to build self-efficacy first, because when times get hard, if they don't have that mental quality, then they'll pack it in when times get hard, right? We also coach them on how to deal with the adversities of life. Problems in life are never ending. And it's usually when people get the most stressed out or overwhelmed by their problems that they pack in their exercise routine. It seems ridiculous, but that's what people do. People think irrationally when they're completely stressed out, right? And it's like, we need to coach that better so that when clients are going through hard times, that the first thing they do is they reach out to you rather than just say, I don't have time to go to the gym. We need to shift that perspective so that you can be the go-to person to give not only physical strength, but mental strength. I think that's a lost opportunity. We focus too much on the external. No success and victory on the outside is sustainable without success on the inside. And what behooved me was when I started taking courses in this industry, nobody talked about that stuff at all. Like I had to when I started to teach it up here in Canada, it was the only course being offered that touched on mental toughness or anything like with the psychology at the time, right? So it was kind of like breakthrough at the time, but I think there's going to be a shift towards that as people start to realize the importance of the forgotten muscle of the mind. We need to train correctives of perspectives, and we need to know how to coach it subtly in a session, right? So it might be like, okay, so you might tell yourself something that gets you worked up or stressed out or agitated, right? And then I could just say to you, hey man, why is it a bad idea to think that way? You know, why is it a bad idea? I'm just curious. And why exactly do you believe this to be true? And is this the undeniable truth, or is this just a story you're telling yourself, right? And what would it take for you to change your attitude? You know, what's the evidence that this is the wrong attitude to have, or that it's just plain untrue? And what's the empowering truth? I say those kinds of things conversationally when I coach clients, so that you're giving way more value than just the sheer act of going through the weights and exercises and keeping the body physically fit. There's so much more we can give in that experience. You know, if you have an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours of undivided attention with a client every week, we can give to them on so many dimensions of their life, right? And I think stepping up to that, like stepping up that we can coach them on holistic lifestyle strategies and sleep and just general healthy tips for eating and stress and in addition to the exercise, right? So I think that's where I think things are going to shift in that direction more so as we realize the necessity for it, especially with the unique time we're in right now.
There's a lot there, man. I mean, that was kind of like a whole show.
Just tell me to shut up, man.
You
just give me the yes. Shut up. All right, I need to say something about that. Let's talk about that.
No, man, that was good. We can wrap things up here anyways. But there's a few things to touch on. Number one, let's start with like the very, very not existential part of things. Creating that professional network is just so important. And I think that a lot of times people are afraid, coaches, especially if we're on not the lower rungs of the healthcare space or the fitness industry, you know, but like we're not these high level coaches and you know, sought after trainers. Like we feel weird sending clients to people and admitting that we don't know things, but that's so important. And I've also found, like you've found, often these people are just so excited to share information with you. Like you went into these appointments and they were just overly, I have not come across, I mean, it's weird, like starting to work like PhDs and legitimate doctors and they're like all about helping you. And they're just stoked. They're just happy to see somebody's interested in what they're interested in more often than not. So, and honestly, if they aren't, like, is that someone you wanted to learn from anyways? The second one, actually, these are kind of just combined here. So you mentioned, you know, having these conversational, you said correctives of perspectives. I think that is where these changes need to happen. It's happening subtly because you're, you know, just having a conversation with somebody, but that's like these things compound. So if you let one of these opportunities go where somebody's potentially perpetuating some kind of negative thought patterns, if you let that one go, and then, you know, when you could have assessed it there and potentially stopped it, now that's just, you know, added to the bank. And then, you know, next conversation, they have another one and you don't stop it. And it's like, it's just compiling. I think we often, we tend to think that these changes need to happen in like one come to God experience. But it's like, no, actually it's going to come from these habitual patterns over time. Like you said, building that self-efficacy is so incredibly important. And in fact, that topic has came up in pretty much every single conversation I've had with fitness professionals, because it's pretty much everything. It's pretty much everything. Like that was something that I recognized at the beginning of my career without even realizing it, was that we needed to be setting them up, our clients up, for success post working with us. That was something that I felt, one of the very few things that I felt I did right from the get-go was I wanted them to be successful later on. So what I didn't realize at that time was it was about developing that self-efficacy. But now I know that, and it's much easier to identify it, and it's honestly a little bit easier to approach. But I mean, like having an iterative mindset, if we could kind of summarize this, having that iterative mindset where failure isn't failure, frame these failures for your clients in a way that can be positive and productive, versus, okay, now they're, degrading that self-efficacy with these failures. So yeah, man, that was a lot that kind of tucked in at the very end. But I mean, overall, Brendan, it was awesome. I'm very, very grateful for you coming on, and love to see what you guys are doing at Exercise Therapy Association. And we're looking forward to collabing more in the future, man.
Yeah, thanks. And I'd love anybody who's been listening in on the call and resonates with any of the values and things I talked about to come join us, so we can help you in your journey to realize how great you can be.